The Australian Curriculum Studies Association would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands and the waterways from where we are all meeting today. We pay our respects to the elders past and present, and we extend our respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples here today. We value the contributions of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples to education and their continued support of the teaching and learning of all Australians. We recognise that for thousands of years, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples have been the first teachers, and that we are committed to continue our learning alongside them. Welcome everyone back to AXA, and this is part of our wonderful Masterclass and webinar series, and we're delighted today to welcome Dr. Paul Browning. So welcome, Paul.
Thank you, Anna. Great to be here.
Wonderful. Now I'll give you a little bit of background on Paul, because he is one of Australia's no names in education. He's quite an eminent in the field, having led two very large independent schools for over 25 years. In 2018, he was recognised as the Australian Non-Government Principal of the Year, and then went on to be awarded the ACLQ Miller Grassi Award for his outstanding leadership in education. And then in 2024, what an accolade, an Order of Australia for his services to education. So we really are in good company today. Now, Paul's work in educational innovation, his trust and leadership has been globally recognised. And it was lovely to see you'd spoken at an international level, being invited by the Gates Foundation to speak at an education summit in Washington. He's helping school leaders to transform their schools into places fit for the 21st century. He's the author of Compelling Leadership, The Importance of Trust and How to Get It. But really, it's his new vision that we're going to be talking about today. As an entrepreneur, an innovator in education, his vision has led to the birth of something called ViVEDUS. Now, this current work focuses on a partnership that they have now developed with the Graduate School of Education at University of Melbourne. It's a very exciting time and a world-first project, as they're tackling the creation of assessment tools to measure something that we really would like a tangibility on, the students' ability to think creatively. So welcome, Paul.
Thank you. Thank you for your kind words, Anna.
Not at all.
Yeah.
What an honour to have you here. What a vast background you have in education. You know, it's one of those things where you actually have done it. You know, you've got that behind you. So you really are someone who new leaders can get into and trust, because you've been on that journey and that experience.
Yeah, education is essentially all I've actually ever known. I started my career as a primary teacher back in 1990, working at a very small independent school in New South Wales.
Okay.
So my first class was 28 5-year-olds. So I've kind of been there, done that, taught little 5-year-olds all the way up to year 12. So I've taught the whole spectrum and worked in several different states. And so, yeah, really, education is a passion of mine, and particularly creativity is a real passion. Yeah.
And now you're heading into the tertiary space with the Graduate School of Education. So you really are covering all bases, looking at the future of education. This idea of creativity really hooked me in. And I think I mentioned before we started here that, you know, we kind of have it in the curriculum as one of those strands of critical and creative thinking. And many people have tried to kind of put the finger on what is it and how do we embed it in our general teaching. But I kind of think that nobody really can hone in on the exact parts that we would like to kind of assess or learn more about. But you seem to be pulling through that to really sift away the weeds, to really get down to the fundamentals of what we're assessing in those creative skills. So tell me more about that.
Well, it's probably good, I think, for people to understand where it's come from, the journey to get to this point. And then if you want to do a deep dive into some specific details or information, then feel free to do so. Yeah. If you don't mind, I'll just share. Hopefully you can see that there. I've got a slide deck there, and I'll just chop and change and flick based on your questions. But this is a really interesting piece of information, and people out there will know that we've entered a period in change in human history like none other. The emergence of AI is disrupting every facet of life that we know. And it's interesting, I did a bit of reading about the last major revolution in human history, the Industrial Revolution, and that started in the 1700s, 1760, I think it was, but it went for 80 years. So it was a long transition time where people basically moved from farms into the city, started working in factories because of mass production, and was able to actually create new jobs. Obviously, people changed and transitioned to that place, and that was the birthplace of our modern schooling system. But
Yes.
the current revolution that we're in with AI is the transition period is going to be less than a decade. It's extraordinarily quick.
Yes.
And people like Thomas Friedman, who wrote a book called "Thank You for Being Late," basically has said that the rate of change is accelerating like a J curve, and our ability to keep up, it's surpassed our ability to keep up, and which is probably one of the reasons why we're seeing so many mental health issues starting to come
Yes.
about in young people and adults as well. Jobs
Yeah.
will be transformed as a result of AI, and organisations like the World Economic Forum, so you can see the slide there, they're saying that the number one skill that young people need to have to be employable in the future of AI is the ability to think creatively.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah.
It's the skill sets that AI can't replicate. So that is going to emerge in the new jobs and the new economy that comes out of this transition that we're right in the middle and the thick of at the moment.
Yeah.
And if you think about that, you probably remember Sir Ken Robinson,
Yes,
and
I
he
was going to say,
he
yeah.
creativity has really been a passion of mine since I became a teacher back in the
Yeah.
90s. But this guy's TED Talk in 2006 was really the provocation for the work that we're doing at ViVEDUS. This is where it actually began. So really compelling TED Talk about schools killing the creative thinking abilities of young people. And so
Yeah.
that was the provocation for us. This piece of research is interesting. It's
Mm.
old, but nonetheless, it's still relevant. So George Land in
Yes.
1968, created this creativity test because the Americans obviously were trying to get to the moon, and so there were all sorts of teams working on this massive problem, and he had a small part to play. But basically showed and supported Sir Ken's comments that we're all born with the ability to think creatively.
Yeah.
It's a natural human trait, and yet when we go to school, it kind of gets conditioned out of us.
Yes, it's
Yeah,
interesting that one, isn't it? Because, I was talking to someone the day about, in that early childhood space, and you could go into any pre-primary classroom and a teacher will tell you that she's got 24 scientists, 24 artists,
yeah,
24 English, fabulous literary agents who are going to go on and change books in the world and all those mathematicians. And suddenly we're getting further up the pipeline and we're sort of, and I think it's also societal, we're pushing people into those boxes. And we know that gender hasn't, gender issues come in and boys are better at this and girls are better. We have this kind of fixed mentality, which is so sad because actually we know as adults that if we're pushed into uncomfortable spaces, that's actually when we probably perform at our best.
yeah, where we thrive.
Yes,
Exactly.
exactly.
Yeah. And if creativity or the ability to think creatively is a natural human trait, it's really sad for everybody that we're kind of left with this remnant of what we think creativity actually is when we leave school. And if you were to ask adults, are you creative? Most people would say, no, I can't draw. Or
Yes,
I
yes.
can't play music. But that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about the ability to
Yes.
think creatively, not produce a piece of artwork.
No.
So
And it
it's a
was,
different thing.
yeah, and I had a lovely conversation with a PhD student yesterday in a kind of a we were recording with him, and he's doing a big project on the anxiety of teachers teaching maths. So not about the children's anxiety,
Yeah.
genuinely about these primary school teachers teaching maths. And one quote that was so wonderful was that a teacher said, "My principal told me to think of maths as an art, and it changed my whole perception of how I teach it." So I
Yeah.
didn't go in with this fixed mindset of it's got to be right or wrong. When I saw it as an art and how creative I can be, and she did something, I think it was beautiful, where she said, I take my shoes off and and she says, I'm a drama teacher. So I put that into my maths. And so we're physical, we're in the space. And she said it changed the dynamic of the children because they knew it was maths time and the creativity. And I was
Yeah.
like, that is actually mind blowing because we're taught to teach in certain ways and then for
Yeah.
somebody to come at it from a different approach and the principal to give her that I thought was really exciting.
Yeah, and that you kind of hit the heart of what we
Mhm.
actually are doing at ViVEDUS. ViVEDUS is a pedagogical approach to teaching at the
Yeah.
very heart of what we actually do, and it's about teaching creatively and teaching
Yes.
for creativity. So it's about
Yes.
providing teachers with the tools to actually do exactly what that teacher has done with their maths
Yeah.
class. Because I would argue that maths is just another language.
Yes.
It's a language to help explain the world in which we live. And interestingly, when you say that, my son has a PhD in mathematics, and he works full time he was at Oxford University, and he's just moved back to Melbourne University now. And I asked him when he was at school, why the passion for mathematics? He said, "Oh, Dad, I just see patterns. I see patterns." So his brain is thinking differently to what yours and mine might be, but he's using that creativity to actually interpret the world around him through the language of mathematics. Yeah.
And if we apply that, because I know this from my own experience, when I was at university, I did linguistics. But what I loved about it was the coding of language. So knowing that I could identify parts of speech. So then when I got into teaching, someone said, "Can someone teach this new digital technologies curriculum? Anyone have a go?" And I was put into it. And then suddenly I realized algorithmic thinking all aligned. And I could spot any problem solving, being able to go, which bit's missing? How do we sort that out? And that's sort of one of those things where there's crossover skills that we kind of miss out on because we're kind of pushed into this is a subject, and then go, oh, actually, I've got to sort of really work on my strengths to then leverage off something else.
And you're getting to the heart of the ViVEDUS pedagogical framework as well when you say those sorts of words. So again, if I just share this screen, because when we talk about, and ViVEDUS is underpinned by significant academic research, and I will be upfront, and most of this research is my colleagues who works for ViVEDUS as the head of research and development. Her name's Gabrielle Kempton, so she's done academic research into creativity, and this is the definition that we use for creative intelligence, because there's all sorts of different creativities. There's little c creativity, there's big C creativity. People might have heard of those sorts of things, but what we're talking about is creative intelligence, the ability to think creatively within a school context. So people of school age children, basically. So essentially the definition is there: through the application of knowledge, creative dispositions and self-determination, the student generates original ideas and novel solutions relevant to a context. So as you look at that definition, you're starting to hear a little bit about this is actually about building student agency.
Yes, student voice. It's actually about there.
Yes, exactly. It's helping them see the relevance of what they're learning, and then helping them to transfer those skills and understandings to different curriculum areas. So if I move on a little bit, what we have discovered, provoked by Sir Ken Robertson when he said that schools kill creativity. It's kind of like, well, if it's the number one skill that young people need to have, and we unintentionally condition that out of the minds of young people when they come to school, we really need to be teaching for these skill sets. Otherwise, young people won't be employable in the future. And it's certainly not a question about creativity or content knowledge. They have to have a deep understanding of the content before they can actually think creatively, use that knowledge to generate new and novel ideas. So it's not one or the other. So when you teach for creativity, you essentially bring learning to life. You provide relevance and meaning for why a student's actually learning it. You improve their engagement. You deepen their learning because you're activating higher order cognition, and you equip them with the skills and dispositions they need to thrive in the future. So it's a win-win all round. And then the teacher you described with mathematics, because she's able to teach creatively and for creativity, and she's doing it, then the joy of teaching comes back as well. So it's quite remarkable. But through the research we've and sorry, I've fuzzed these out because it's our intellectual property. So if you need to know more, listeners do come and talk to us. But we found 14 dispositions that are necessary for creative thinking to occur. Now, there are lots of dispositions, but these 14 are relevant, the most relevant for every subject area across every grade level. So when you talk about the transferring of skills and knowledge across disciplines, we're talking about these specific dispositions. These dispositions are the most relevant transferable skills or dispositions across all curriculum areas, across all grade levels, from the first year of school through to year 12. I will unpack those a little bit so people can understand a little bit. So the dispositions there, I've offered a couple there. There's 4 out there in the hexagonal dark blue tiles, the smaller tiles. So when we talk about dispositions, we're talking about experimental, curious, open to dialogue and collaboration, perceptive of connections and patterns. So they're 4 of the 14 dispositions. In the green there, the larger hexagonal tiles are pedagogies.
Yeah.
So approach to teaching or learning that the teacher would employ in the classroom that we know through research that we've actually done will activate those dispositions. So if you incorporate challenges, if you can see that there, I'll try and zoom in a little bit there so people can see that.
Yeah.
If you incorporate challenges that can be approached from varying angles and allow students to think in different ways, you'll activate the dispositions of being experimental, curious, open to collaboration and dialogue. So you'll activate those dispositions.
Yeah.
And if a teacher is using this framework, they could actually say to the students before the lesson starts, during this lesson, I want you to be experimental.
Yes.
Yeah, I really want you to be that curious about what we're going to do here. This activity will help you to become more curious. Now, you mentioned the work that we've done with the University of Melbourne. There was we had rolled this out in the last school that we worked at with significant effect. It really had significantly improved student learning, their engagement in learning. The questions that they were asking were incredible. And the parents were noticing just the difference in the children's love of coming to school and what they were actually doing. So one parent came to me and said, Paul, how do I know that my child is going to be more creative if they're taught in this way, in their ability to think? Because I was the leader of an independent school, they're paying big money to actually come to the school. How do I know it's actually going to have an effect? And it was a great question, great provocation. So the question, how do we actually measure it?
Yes.
Because we value what we measure and we measure what we value. And at the moment in schools, all we measure really is NAPLAN and ATAR, the exiting results. So what we've done with the University of Melbourne, we've partnered with them and the team led by Sandra Milligan, and we've been working with them for a number of years. Each of those dispositions, we've defined what it actually means. So there are essentially 3 characteristics for each of the dispositions. So for this one, perceptive of patterns and connections, you can see the characteristics associated with that. So that's what it means. And who wouldn't want a child to recognise and work with connections and patterns in science or in mathematics or patterns in English? Who wouldn't want to recognise that? It's one of those dispositions that are transferable across all curriculum areas.
Yeah.
Then with the university.
Sorry. When I was just looking at that and the previous one, what was really interesting for me was that it really shouts inclusivity. In a world where we are given multiple, a child needs this and needs this, and it's an overwhelming feeling, I think, for a lot of teachers at the moment, the amount of support they need to give to every individual student. And it varies as well. This child needs this, or this child needs this. To me, even the kind of thing where when you're talking about experiences and relationships and all those sorts of things, that's a holistic approach, which children can tap into in their own kind of way, but you're catering for that. You can go off in that direction because that's divergent, or you've got this option, but we're very mindful that you're all on your pathways. That's really important.
Anna, you're music to my ears, because my philosophy of education, ever since becoming an educator, has been a holistic one. And the belief that every person is uniquely different in many ways. We're similar in many ways, but we each have our own gifts, skills and talents. And if we're teaching just to the middle and just teaching a particular content piece and ignoring the skills and the abilities and the imagination, the curiosity, then we're not really engaging the whole spectrum of young people. If we're not giving them agency over their learning, we're not actually giving them an avenue into the learning. And so this really is
and that knocks the confidence. Probably when you're talking about that, about why we went into education, it knocks your confidence if you don't see a student succeed. And I always used to say that my goal when I left university was that every child's going to succeed in my classrooms regardless, and if they aren't succeeding, I will fight tooth and nail to find some way that they can succeed. But what we find is so many in the speed of how we're sort of going about teaching is that, as you're saying, this middle band is where we focus. And if we make the top or the bottom, that's a bonus. But we're actually, as teachers, that breaks our heart, because not every child we can give that to, and we need to have that.
And there's some really philosophical questions that come out of your comments there, like what is success?
Yes.
What does that actually mean? What does it look like? And
Mm.
unfortunately, in our current paradigm of education, success looks like a grade ATAR or a great, but it doesn't mean that if you get a grade ATAR, you're actually going to necessarily make a great doctor. Or you're,
Yes.
for example,
Yeah.
you don't necessarily have the right qualities to become what would make a fantastic doctor, or
Mm.
you don't have the skill set to actually, I don't know, be an
Yeah.
accountant or whatever
Yeah.
the case, whatever career path you actually choose. So, as you say, these dispositions are about the skills that young people have, and all of us innately are able to think creatively. And if we can
Yeah.
tap into those dispositions, then we give young people access to the learning in a different sort
Yeah.
of way, which is really exciting.
Mm.
So, with the University of Melbourne, we've worked with them to answer that question. Well, how do we actually measure it then? Like, if we
Yeah.
value this, surely we should be actually reporting on it, measuring it and reporting on it to seeing the progress that we're actually making. And if we develop assessment tools, then all of a sudden the mindset of a teacher might change and go, okay, I need to be thinking about these skills as well as the development of content knowledge. And so we've worked with them using the characteristics of each of those dispositions, created assessment rubrics or frameworks for each of the dispositions. So, and we've been doing that with them for a number of years to create what it looks like their levels of progression. And
Yes.
so essentially what happens, there are 14 dispositions. We have built a planner tool, built all of our intellectual property onto a software platform.
Yeah.
And it's a platform for teachers. It's where they
Right.
go to plan for learning.
Mm.
So, and it's been designed to not only reduce their workloads, make their lives easier, but also to support them to embed these dispositions and pedagogies into their planning.
Yes.
So as they connect to curriculum in the planner tool, the AI tool that we built is an AI pedagogical coach, and it
Mm.
will step the teachers through the process of planning a great unit of work, be it single discipline or interdisciplinary,
Mm.
generating really creative ideas to teach for creativity and creatively,
Yeah.
and then embedding into that planning the pedagogies that they need to use during that unit. And then
Yes.
more excitingly, once the unit is developed, the AI tool then will actually plan individual lessons for that teacher with those pedagogies and dispositions, all
Yes.
tailored to the individual needs of the students in their class.
Yes.
So all a teacher then needs to do, because what we've found when you ask teachers to teach for creativity, teachers have been conditioned to think that they're not
Mm.
creative as well. And that's a bit of a barrier.
Yeah.
I'm not
Yeah.
creative, or I teach
Mm.
science, that's not creative, or I teach maths and that's not
Yes.
creative. In actual fact, they are. And yes, you are. It's just that you've lost the ability to think in that way. So here are the tools that you need to help you to
Mm.
teach in the way that you described that maths teacher beautifully, of how she was
Mm.
introducing mathematics to the students. So
Yes.
essentially she's doing what we've done there, but the AI planner tool enables them to do that. When we design a unit, or when a teacher designs a unit, the AI tool will only recommend 2 or 3 dispositions. So
Right.
over the course of a 10-week unit, for example, a teacher is only focusing on 2 or 3 dispositions. And so therefore, when they assess those dispositions, it's just a click, looking at the individual
Yeah.
child. Do you see this particular trait in something that they do, make, see, or say, and then clicking on and off using the supercomputer at Ruby, called Ruby
Yeah.
at Melbourne University. And then the psychometricians have done some really interesting work behind the scenes with the analytics and the
Yes.
algorithms, and it will spit out a progression to say, this is where this child is at. This is what they're good at in terms of their
Yeah.
skills and dispositions.
And
So
yeah.
that's really quite exciting. And then finally, we can, if you wanted to, you don't have
Yeah.
to, you can produce a learner profile. And this is warranted a credential by the University of Melbourne. And you talked a little bit about the work with Sandra before we started here, but that
Yeah.
some really quite groundbreaking work there, that we can not only show what a child knows, but we can also show what a child can do and the
Yes.
skill
And
sets that they actually have. Yeah.
you look at some of those things there, and how many, if you looked at a job description on any kind of Seek, what are they
Yes.
asking? Their CV and what that is quite irrelevant, because we've got to do a
Yeah.
4-page cover letter and we've got to address all of those criteria.
Yeah.
Can we work as part of a team? Can we be
Yes.
innovative at times? So it's such a bizarre thing that we go through this process. And, I think as well as teachers, you start at the end, we start, say, with ATAR and we work our way back. Okay, this is what we've got to achieve, so let's work our way back. Or we have, the learning objectives, but so we think we're going in that forward position, but actually we're looking at what that child needs to achieve by the end of year 5 and working our way back. And we get stuck in that cycle. Whereas here you're going, I'm actually future-proofing them so that when they have to write that 4-page job application, they can confidently say, yes, I am good at problem solving.
And they have evidence.
Yes, exactly.
That's exciting. And
Yeah.
and that's that's an interesting thing you actually say. So part of the research we've actually done to build the ViVEDUS learning activation model is to talk to industry, and we surveyed industry leaders across the country, and we asked them the question: when you're looking for a new hire, a new employee, which of these 3 is the most important? Their academic qualifications, or their character traits, or their skills and dispositions.
Yes.
Now, we often think, no, you need a degree to get a job, and that's the pathway. Well, that pathway is rapidly disappearing. The number one thing employers say that they look for in a new hire is their character, who that person is. Are they going to fit in with the team? Do they have the same values as our company?
Yes.
Very closely followed by their skills and dispositions. What skills do they bring to my company that will help us identify new problems, solve those new problems, and generate new market opportunities for our company? They don't care so much about the qualifications anymore because they can train people on the job.
Yeah, and that's a really good point to make in the world of AI as well, where I think someone mentioned the other day and said, flippantly about something, and said, yeah, but AI can write your CV and AI can write your cover letter. And my immediate response said, if I was hiring a member of staff, I wouldn't get from them. Like, I wouldn't be able to hear their voice. And that's the failing. And there's a lot of research, like Dr. Lucinda McKnight and Leon Furzer in that space of the lens at which AI comes out is not your lens. It's a narrative that is very different. And so whilst we could say in that context, at the moment, people are using AI very much at that perfunctory level. That's what it is. And we're losing the essence. Whereas here you're building something that is able to kind of reduce the workload, but also then allow somebody to take some of that evidence, build upon it, because they've got that rubric and that real kind of strong data behind it, and develop their sense of self and be what they are. And that's the really important, how we're going to blend those two is how successful the future of the education system is going to be, isn't it?
Yeah, and that goes to the heart of why we probably all chose to become teachers in the first place, because A, we love learning, but B, we love working with young people and we want to set them up for success. We didn't become teachers because we wanted to deliver mathematics.
No,
or
exactly.
because we want to achieve great NAPLAN results. We actually became teachers because we care about young people and their futures.
Yes. It's a strange place for teachers, I think, at the moment as well, because we see the push from a corporate lens that comes in, that this kind of, if you want to be a leader, you adopt these styles. And I've felt quite strongly that often companies will come in and they will tell you they'll do a DISC profile or they'll do something. And I always find that is actually more divisive amongst a workforce, because someone will say, oh, but I can't do that because I'm a D or I'm an I. So we get this kind of sense of sometimes, and I think it's got its real merits, but actually what you were talking about as well, because you then fix yourself into a box because, well, the psychometrics have told me that I'm this person, I'm going to hold on to that. And therefore I can't work with this person. I haven't got those skills. And I think that's a really sad thing. Unfortunately, teachers are absorbing that and their anxiety is going up because of that, and it just seems to be a perpetual cycle.
It is. The joy of teaching has kind of diminished and disappeared because teachers' workloads are just so immense in terms of administration that every teacher is saying, I just don't have time to plan for learning. And so now I've just got to deliver the content and get through it because we've got the assessment in 3 weeks. And by the way, I've got all these students with particular needs in my class that need IEPs and I need to track evidence to go with that, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm going to be judged on the results that they get in this assessment piece. And the whole joy of teaching has actually just disappeared. I wrote a piece the other day, and it's a real irony and I think a real insight into what's actually happening today. I started teaching in 1990, and back then there was no curriculum. There was absolutely no curriculum.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
we made it up. We trained to be teachers, and the training wasn't particularly great, but we learned
Yeah.
on the job, and we very quickly learned some skills about how to engage young people and bring learning to life. And so we designed some terrific units, had great excursions. Very few
Yeah.
risk assessments, wouldn't do those things today.
Yeah.
But interestingly, when NAPLAN first started, and PISA first started, our results as a nation were incredibly high. And as time has gone on and we've tried to actually standardize everything in education, the results have gone down.
Yeah.
And as we've made compliance so overwhelming, teachers don't have time then for that joy of what they really would love to do in the classroom, because there's the overwhelming nature of all the other problems. And that's why we built the platform. The platform is about reigniting that joy by stripping away and automating all that administration and helping teachers come up with really great ideas underpinned by this pedagogical framework to allow them to teach creatively and for creativity, which then better engages students, reduces behavioural issues, but sets young people up with the skills and dispositions they need in the future.
And I guess, I mean, this is probably what we'll talk a little bit more on, but this only works if you have an administrative team who are behind it, isn't it? That who are saying, I am giving you, I'm giving you the confidence to go and believe in yourself that you can steer off and you can do that. And if you're going to spend Friday afternoon, if all it is making games or being that sort of thing, and I used to find that, especially with little ones, and you're talking about little 5-year-olds, there was no, there was going to be no absorption of a very formal learning on a Friday afternoon. Absolutely not. And it was
period 6 for the year 9 on a Friday afternoon. Yeah, who wants that class?
But I mean, and I had a brilliant principal at one point who just sort of said, you've got a difficult class. And a Friday afternoon was literally playing, and I'd done something where, I used to say to them, these are your skills, and you had a lanyard, and if you could show me that you'd achieved them, and it might be play Minecraft or whatever it was, you achieved that. And that was your Friday afternoon to kind of do that. And I remember someone saying to me, your classroom academic is quite weak, but my goodness, they're so good with each other. I can let them and there's no fighting. And I remember just going, and that was a benefit, like that I suddenly realized was such a thing, that you allow children to have those social elements that you expect will go on the playground, but then you don't allow for it in the classroom. And I just think that part is so sad, but it really relies on an admin team trusting you. And I think that is where it's also gone a bit wrong. People don't appreciate that we've trained for up to 5, if not longer, years. We are experts in our field. Like, trust us to do that.
Yes. And I can't stand it. The media is always really belittling and bringing down teachers, and schools, because the failing standards, it's the headlines, it's the clickbait, it's et cetera, and they don't recognise that teachers work incredibly hard, and they are professionals, and they know what they're doing if they're allowed to actually do it. But sadly, as teachers, we've been so oppressed by that sort of story and that rhetoric that teachers feel like, if I don't achieve these results, I'm going to be belittled again in the mainstream media, and I'm going to fail these young people and parents. And teachers, I think, have lost sight of what the purpose of education is as well, and lost sight of why they became a teacher in the first place, which is why they're kind of thinking, is this really for me? This game is not what I signed up for. But you're right about the culture of a school and the senior leadership team, and that kind of intonates to my other work, my PhD work around building cultures of trust. Any great school, really great school, the principal has to create a culture that is conducive for learning, conducive for where people feel safe, where they will thrive, but where they'll be free to take risks and try things and learn from failures. And that's what learning is anyway for young people. We expect that in the classroom of young people, but as teachers, we also need to create that condition. So my PhD is around building cultures of trust. But for ViVEDUS, we also know we're working with 5 schools across the country at the moment. So we've only just been going for about a year, but this is the result of 17 years worth of research and development. And so we've just launched in the last 18 months to schools, and 5 of them are working. And so we go into a school who's interested in implementing this pedagogical approach
Yes.
And offering teachers the tool to actually reduce their workload and align planning. And as they implement this, there's a whole host of real benefits for a school. You get alignment across the entire school, the common language about what learning looks like. Young people have a framework to talk about their learning. Teachers have a framework to talk about their learning. The platform enables you to see that teachers are actually planning for the right curriculum, and they're aligning that with the learning opportunities and the assessment and the student outcomes. Teachers can get feedback through the platform about their approach in the classroom and feedback that's designed to promote growth. And leaders can see data and insights that they've never seen before that will help them grow the practice of every teacher and help them become better at what they actually do. So we work with the school, and we work with the senior leadership team, and we provide them 2 to 3 days of intensive professional development where we introduce the theory behind the ViVEDUS framework. So what is creative intelligence? What do we mean by that? What are the dispositions? What are the pedagogies? We support them with how to use the platform to plan for learning. And then we know what schools are like too. So we work with that team to develop their leadership capacity and design what's called a rollout plan, because this requires change on the part of teachers, and change is hard. It's not easy, but unfortunately we do need to change what we're doing because we can't keep doing the same thing. But we design a plan where a school would roll this out over a 3-year period. So it's not because we're at the heart of us, it's about the pedagogy, it's about the teaching, and it's about supporting teachers to re-engage young people in learning that's meaningful. So that plan that we leave a school supports them with very realistic goals and support and resources to help them really start talking about pedagogy, building that alignment, getting that common language, supporting teacher growth, and implementing approaches to learning that activate creative intelligence.
Yeah, no, definitely. Now, I'm going to say a bit of a controversial question here because I'm looking at it thinking. So I'm a school, and this is a brand new concept. You're going, I need confidence to know that what I'm doing it right already, and I'm willing to take. You talked about risk there.
Yeah.
This seems great. I'm a school that's really well achieving. I've got the academics sorted. I can take this risk because I've got all the other stuff done. I've got that embedded. I'm okay. I can take risk and go into that career. How do you look at maybe challenging a school that maybe isn't in that sort of solid space yet? Like, how is this going to be something that they can take that risk into going and saying, okay, I'm throwing the bathwater out, and this is what I believe in the future? How do you get around those ones? Because that's what it needs. That's a long-term plan, isn't it? Just get every school in that space.
And that's a question that schools do ask, and I guess it's a barrier to schools saying, actually, this is what we want to do, because a lot of schools, unfortunately, rest on the laurels of their great results and think that they're doing really great things. And it's not necessarily because of great teaching. Can I say and I'll be controversial in saying this, it's largely because of the type of students they've actually got.
Yes.
And also they're in that mindset that an education is about those results. So for us, our identity as a school is about those ATAR results. Yeah. So that's who we are. But I would challenge those schools by saying, look what's actually happening. The University of Melbourne is working on a learner profile. There are schools across the country that are developing learner profiles and on board with Sandra Milligan and the team there. Sandra has just won a grant with the Australian Research Council to lead a review into tertiary entrance across the country. Universities across the world are starting to recognise the learner profile that the University of Melbourne is developing. And the reason they're doing that is because they know that ATAR is not necessarily an indicator of student success with a course that they choose to study at university. Just because they got a 99.95 doesn't mean they're going to make a great doctor. Yeah. So the churn rate for universities is expensive. But with the learner profile, universities then can actually look at the whole child and match them to courses that are really going to be supportive of their success that they're going to achieve at. So the entrance requirements will be about not just their academic ability, but also their skills and dispositions. So schools that are saying, we've got it all right, Are you future-proofing yourself? Are
Yes,
you
yes, yep,
actually prepared for the wave that is coming with AI? Are you thinking about what's happening with the work in Melbourne metrics and the learner
yes,
profiles? Are you thinking about what the new employment opportunities will be for young people? And are you setting them up for success? Or are you just setting them up with an enormous hex debt for
yes,
a degree that they'll never, ever use? Like,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And I saw a lovely quote the other day. Someone said, "Why are A students working for D students in the workforce?"
Yep.
And I thought, and I'm like, and going, yeah, and it was all about risk. And the D students have experienced failure or what's perceived as failure. So they
Yep.
have nothing to lose by trying something new, going out there, and then employing those A students, and that was a really
Yep.
good thing for me. I was like, that just shows where we're getting some things wrong.
Yeah,
you
I think
know,
it's Stuart. Yeah, I think it's Stuart Garber is the name. He said it's possible to get all A's and still flunk life.
yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly.
Yeah,
And we
and
see
that
that at
comes back then
tertiary.
to and that comes back then to that philosophical question: what is the purpose of an education?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah,
And I always tell this to my sister because she's I know you're talking about your son, like they've done all academia, she's a consultant in that, and she's a dermatologist consultant, and I'd always ask her something, and she'd be like, "Nah, that's not my field. I haven't done that for years." And I said, "But there you go. You've done that degree, yeah, but now I don't. Yeah, you'd have to ask your GP, and I'm just in my head going, but you studied all those years to train in that area, and then the more specialized you get, and it's a typical thing of, I think if you
mm,
see academic success, you're aware of all the things that you don't know rather than
yeah,
keeping it so, and you kind of get to that point where you go, oh right, we're not allowing children and people to be adaptable because we're pushing them down into little categories. And
yeah,
but actually what we're seeing is people go up to 15 different jobs in their lifetime,
yeah.
as opposed to
And
that one.
how frightening for that person who's specialized in that particular area to discover tomorrow when they wake up that the company is replacing with AI.
Yes.
And I might be thinking, yeah, that's never going to happen. But you can see examples of this happening all over the place. There's a small legal firm in Lismore here on the east coast of
Mm.
Australia that has got rid of all their paralegals and just using AI software to do all of that work. There was a young lady at my last school who graduated from law only early this year, and she'd got an internship with a big legal firm in the city.
Mm.
And I asked her, what's the impact of AI in the legal firm? She said, oh, none yet, because they haven't worked out how to use them as billable hours. So I'm still doing the work. But
Yeah.
AI can do the work that I'm doing, that I'm employed to do, like that. And so what I've done is I've started my own nail varnishing business, my nail art business, because I can see that the future in law for me is not going to be there. So
Yes.
I've started this business as a side hustle, but I'm actually earning more money from it. So that's where
Yes.
I'll actually end up and go. So the
Yeah.
reality of what's coming, and it's not just me saying this. You listen to Alan Kohler on the ABC.
Mm.
Look his commentary up, the economics
Mm.
commentator on the ABC. He's warning this all the time. There's people across the world who are saying we'll adapt, we will change,
Yes.
but we can't wait for the change to happen to us. We've got
No.
to lead that change. We've got to,
Yeah.
because we're not doing our young people the service.
No. And you make a really good point in terms of the legal profession doing that, because that's one of the biggest areas with AI at the moment is, and I see this in schools, and it breaks my heart actually, because teachers are willing to embrace AI. They want to do it. They hear about
yeah,
it. They're in that space. And what sadly happens is they go to the chat GPT, not understanding it's an open source, and they're inputting data, and I've
yeah,
had to say from, you're actually taking a child's intellectual property and putting it into a machine, which you hope will get the results. And 90% of the time, they won't give you what you want. You can put a rubric in and whatever you want, but it won't tell you. Your gut instinct will tell you if that child is a C or a B. And all it will do is confirm or kind of get you to question. But in that process, you've broken quite a lot of laws along the way. So what that makes it more pertinent for an admin team to go, okay, we need to use a software platform, and whether it is going through your Microsoft Copilot, which we have the control over, so that we have put everything in place to protect our children as they go up.
yeah.
And that's sort of
And
when you're
that
talking about that's so imperative.
It is. And that's, the AI that we built within our platform is a pedagogical coach. And
Yes.
we use OpenAI, we leverage off
Yeah.
OpenAI, but the AI tool within the platform is trained just on the curriculum the school is teaching. So when a school
Yes.
chooses the curriculum that they're implementing in their school, so Western Australia curriculum, for example, just on the Australian professional standards for teachers. So it
Yes.
knows what good teaching looks like, and just on the underlying pedagogical approaches that is ViVEDUS. So when the
Yes.
AI tool returns responses and develops
Mm.
lesson plans for the teachers, a school and a teacher can be entirely confident that what the AI tool returns is
Yes.
exactly what they need to do. It's not drawing, as you say, open source
Yeah.
from a curriculum overseas. It's not creating something randomly. You're not giving away student information and data and giving it up and breaking
Mm.
privacy laws. It's all contained within this space. So a school and a teacher can trust the responses that the AI tool within the ViVEDUS platform is totally reliable and compliant, and
Yes.
is not breaching any sort of laws that a teacher might be completely unaware that they're breaching.
Yeah. And that's the sad thing, isn't it? Because teachers are so willing. We talk about this. We talked about this mainly through this. It's about adaptable, and that teachers are brilliant at trying to do that and trying to make the best of the students and taking on new things because they've seen benefits or they've spoken to their friends and they talk about this. And that's where leadership is so important, isn't it? To get
Yeah.
that right. You talk about, you've obviously got a lot of experience in leadership, and that's where you do have to lead from the front and say,
Yes.
this is where we're
Thank you, Anna. You do. And that's the job of a leader.
yeah.
I would always argue leadership is about transformation. It's about making what you've currently got better. It's about seeing, in a sense, into the future and what could be, and helping your organisation adapt to those possible futures as well. So preparing the school or the organisation for those future possibilities. If you're not doing that, then you're just managing. You're just looking after the status quo. And there's nothing wrong with management. We all need good management of schools, but it's actually not about leading a school to become a better place. So for those schools that you talk about that, we've got great academic results, it's fantastic. Why do we need this? Well, I'd say, well, you can amplify those results. You can add another layer to the students' capabilities. You can provide them with the skill sets as well as the ATAR results that they need to be employable in the future. But more importantly, you can lead your school and prepare it for that future that is coming very, very shortly because of the impact of AI and robotics.
Yeah. And it was interesting. I spoke to someone the other day, and they reflected someone they'd been working with, and the principal had said, it's not good practice, it's next practice. What does
Yes,
that look like? And I was like, wow, that's so powerful, isn't it? Rather than being in the moment, we're looking at what the future is going to look like.
Yeah.
So, Paul, it's a bit hard to wrap this up because genuinely we could talk all day about this and, aligned thinking, and it's just gone on. And, I'm lucky because here in the West, I'm seeing more of the University of Melbourne metrics coming into play. And I really do think that this is going to be something that is going to just keep building momentum. And as you're saying, it's because it's evidence-based, there's data there to show us, and that's what we need to really move forward.
And because schools also, who are working with new metrics, understand that education, a real education, is more than just those academic results. They know that as a school, we want to support these young people to become people of character. We want them to have these values. We want them to have these skills. And if they're important, then how are we actually doing that?
Yes.
And how are we valuing that? So that's why that movement's actually there as well. So, and again, underpinning all of that is the ViVEDUS framework, giving people the tools to actually do that, credentialed by the University of Melbourne. So it's exciting work. It really is very, very exciting work. Yeah,
it is. And there's nothing better as a teacher. We've talked multiple times in this conversation about why we went into education.
Yeah.
And it's not for ourselves, because my goodness, holidays are certainly a time where you spend most of it recovering, and then the rest of it
and
preparing.
then the other preparing.
Exactly. It's certainly not that, and financial, yes, we're sort of in that space, but my goodness, it certainly doesn't pay back for the amount of work that we put in and the hours and all that sort of stuff, and a lot of the flexibility we don't have. But what we are really passionate when we go in is children succeeding, and there's nothing better than a child you taught, and whether it's 5 years or 20 years, coming back and saying, look at me, because they're proud to tell you about it.
And
this is me.
can you indulge me with just one more minute, because you've triggered a
100%.
memory in my mind. So, I reached out on LinkedIn the other day to Professor Alan Hayes, who was a parent of a young girl called Sarah, and she wasn't in my first year of teaching, but she was certainly the first few years. I think it was the second or third year of teaching. She was in what was called a transition class. It was kindergarten or the first year of school, and I reached out to him just to connect on LinkedIn and said, "Hey, Alan, how are you?" And he said, "Oh, it's Sarah still remembers the biplane that you built with the class and hung from the ceiling in the classroom, and remembers the great things that she did in your class." This is 35 years ago. And as you say, a young lady I taught when she was only 5 or 6 can still remember that. And it's moments like those that make teaching so special and so rewarding. We don't get those moments very often, but when we do get them, they're just gold.
Yeah. And if we can look back and say we provided those experiences,
Yeah.
and that child becomes something, and they look back on their education system and think of those really wonderful moments, and as you're saying, like that, can then say that one bit was something that I absolutely love, and I've got this beautiful memory. So I think the future of education is there. And I think when we, as you mentioned before, when we are sort of ground into the, like pushed into the ground as educators and really have it tough sometimes, holding on to why we're there and what we're doing, I think is crucially important. So thank you, Paul. What a wonderful conversation.
Thank you.
And I am thrilled. I will definitely be putting out to our listeners and our viewers all of the sort of information that you have. And I really encourage people to obviously reach out to you on LinkedIn, first of all, and get that personal connection, but also to look into your work and see what the University of Melbourne doing and your work with ViVEDUS, and look at how you can transform your school for the future. So thank you very much, Paul.
Thank you, Anna.